Welcome to Grant Rock Warehouse, and tonight I have Dave Lubin and Todd Evans in the house. We are going to do a show on the Beatles. Well, Beatles solo. We're doing our top 10 solo tracks. Let's get ready.
Talking bands no one talks about. Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse tonight, and we are doing a Beatles show. And I said I'd never do a Beatles show. For anyone watching, why would we do a Beatles show in the warehouse when everybody else is doing it? But tonight, this is an exception because we aren't doing the Beatles per se, but we are doing Beatles solo. So that's okay. That's fine. I'm good with this. So we're going to do our top 10 favorite Beatle solo tracks. Now, I must say on my behalf, I can't speak for the other two gentlemen. This is very difficult. My list could change next week. It probably would change tomorrow. But this is what it is today. I want to welcome Todd Evans and Dave Lubin here tonight. They have their lists ready. And we kind of talked before, and I know this is a difficult task. This is, in today's world, this is an impossible task. But we did it. We're going to talk about it. So, gentlemen, nice to see you. How are you? You ready to talk some
Very good, thank you.
Beatles solo?
Let's talk Beatles solo.
All right, let's do it. All right, so we've got 10 tracks. We're just going to go around. I guess, what the hell? I'm going to start with Mr. Lubin tonight, and then we'll go Todd and then me, and we'll just keep, let me think. Oopsie. We've got 10 tracks.
I think we should go one at a time.
You think one at a time? What the hell? Let's just go one at a time and keep it moving. All right, Todd. All right, Dave, start off with your number 10.
My number 10. So I recall when we did our Chicago show, Todd would brought up the disco song that Chicago did. I just had to fit this one in because at the time I really liked this song. Paul McCartney went disco with "Don't Say Goodnight Tonight" from 1979. And I said, I said, even if I'm not going to be 100% honest, that if I'm being 100% honest, is it really in my 10 favorites? But what I liked about it is that when I think about the rock groups and the rock performers at that time who went disco, like Yellow, like Kiss, they did kind of a disco rock thing. Paul just said, nope, I can do it. I can go true to what disco is. And he came up with this disco song, and it's a true disco song. And there's 3 releases that exist. There's a 4-minute version, a 7-minute version, and a 12-minute version that they didn't play in the discotheques back in the day. And also staying true to the fact that he is a rock performer. When Back to the Egg came out, he did not include this particular song on that album. And what ended up happening? Well, he got a platinum album with Back to the Egg, and he got a gold single, this one. So he kind of double dipped. And it's just a fun song. You've got everything. You've got him doing all kind of bass riffs. You've got a little flamenco guitar going on. And I think the song is almost completely forgotten now. I mean, unless you're listening to maybe 70s on 7 on Sirius Satellite, I don't really recall hearing it anywhere. But that's my number 10. And hey, Paul, way to go. You showed that a rock guy can certainly put together one heck of a disco tune. And I do got to mention a Paul McCartney song that I really like, "Getting Closer" from Back to the Egg, got cut because I just so badly wanted to include this one. So
well, Back to the Egg is one of my favorite Wings albums. So and we've talked about that before.
Yeah, that song "Goodnight Tonight" though at the time was insanely popular.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the radio just all the time.
Killer bass part.
Yeah,
it's what we expect from Paul, but it's absolutely brilliant stuff. Okay, excellent, Dave. So there you go. We're starting. What? Hey, it's a little low. Well, actually, I didn't even choose that because there are some other tracks. But Dave, I love it. Let's keep going. Todd Evans, what's your number 10?
All right. Well, I do want to say though that I didn't consider "Goodnight Tonight" because I only looked at albums, and so it didn't get in my head. I might have picked it, or it might have been just bubbling under my 10. But my number 10 is "Bluebird," and it wasn't always my number 10. It was my number 10 was something else, one of the George songs from All Things Must Pass, but it got bumped for Bluebird at the last minute. And because I really didn't want to not include anything from Band on the Run. And I have this really vivid memory of my impressions of Bluebird. I didn't really listen to it. I didn't discover it until like 1977.
Mhm.
And I remember being in the, was it 77? Yeah, I guess so. I remember being in the eighth grade and staying over at a friend's house. And I remember for some reason we went to bed like early, like 9:30. And I was bored. I was bored out of my tree. I was like, this was a mistake staying over at this guy's house. But the radio was on, and for some reason they decided to play Wings Over America, like all the way through, like a special Friday night thing. And I remember that was the first time I heard Bluebird, and I was just completely mesmerized by it because it was dark and I was bored. And then that song came on, and I was like, I've never heard this Paul McCartney song before, and I was hooked on it. So it's always been a favorite.
Oh my God, Todd, you just sent me back into like a time warp. For one, that's a great pick. But two, I had a similar situation when I was a kid. I must have been about 8, and I stayed overnight. Some kid from my class asked me to spend the night at his house. And I said, okay. Well, I did it. And then I don't know what time it was, but I was uncomfortable. I couldn't really get into it. And I think I got up like at 5 in the morning and walked home. And it was like, I just
Well,
got
but
up and left. I got
usually
up and
that's
left.
fun. Yeah, I mean, usually it's fun. You stay up all night and play records and watch Night Flight and
Yeah,
all
I
that stuff.
wasn't
And
into
so
it.
every once in a while, it doesn't end
And you
right.
know what?
But
I can't even remember what that kid's name was. But I got up at 5 because I was in hell. And I walked home, which was probably 2 or 3 miles from my house. Well, maybe not. It was probably like maybe it's a mile. I don't know. You know, when you're a kid, everything seems like it's a long distance. It
yeah,
probably wasn't, but I had to go home. My mom said, "Well, why are you here?" I said, "Just
I
nothing
just came
happened.
home and I was
I
bored.
just couldn't get into it. I just had to come home." All
But
right.
Bluebird, whenever I think of that, whenever I hear the song, and it's a very the atmospheric quality of that song is just
Oh, it's top notch.
outstanding, and Linda's voice and the little percussion things, and it's just great.
All right, cool, excellent. So I see, ladies and gentlemen, we already went on a tangent, but that's what we do
That was a
here in the
crazy
where.
one too.
Well, I just reminded, I hadn't thought about that in years, but it's a true story. We like to share here in the warehouse. All right, so my number 10, I'm going to go with, oh boy, don't throw eggs at me. I'm going to go with John Lennon, Working Class Hero. Now, I've been on record and I've talked to these gentlemen about this that I'm not a big fan of the John Lennon solo catalog. It seems like when John got out of the Beatles, he didn't have anybody else there to really egg him on to keep contributing. But the first Plastic Ono Band album, when he just got out of the Beatles from 1970, I think it's brilliant. Working Class Hero is a political song, as we all know. It's quite a bit different than anything else in the John Lennon catalog or the Beatle catalog for that matter. But I do like this record because, for one, yeah, it was produced by John, Yoko, and Phil Spector. But unlike the rest of John's catalog, this actually sounds pretty decent production wise. I am not a big Phil Spector fan. I'm fine with Phil doing Phil back in the 60s with the Ronettes and everybody. I'm good with that. Once Phil started to mess with the Beatles, then I have a little bit of issue. And I like his work with the Ramones. That's fine. But I'm not a big fan of what he did with the Beatles. And but still, I'm going to give this a pass. I think this is John Lennon at his peak, right? He never achieved this ever again, I don't think. Because this album's very artistic, it's very political, it's very raw. John Lennon is bearing his soul on this record. And I think Working Class Hero is a good example of him doing that. You might not like political stuff, but it's political. That's John Lennon. But that's my number 10. I know everyone's going to go, "Oh my God, Grant, what is wrong with you?" But
No,
that's
I
okay.
actually think that one's got a lot of
Critical.
critical acclaim, so
It
I don't
does
think
have a
I'll
lot of
get in any
critical
trouble for
acclaim.
that one.
Well, I think people think very highly of it. But when I look,
Oh, you mean maybe 10's not high enough?
maybe 10's not high enough.
Okay, I see where you're going with that.
But when I'm looking at the rest of the catalog, and you cannot, I'm going to be quiet. I don't want to get in trouble. All right, I'm going to throw it over to Dave. Dave, what's your number 9?
So my number 9 is the title track from London Town.
Oh,
So this is not the this one actually only peaked at number 39, but it was released as a single. This was just before Joe English and Jimmy McCullough left Wings for various reasons. But I just remember when I went to London last year, there was something about this song. That was the first time I was ever in London, and that song was like playing in my head. I don't know, it captures the essence of the city, maybe for as me as a tourist, but it was just like the perfect beat to like when you're walking around London. And what he and like the way I saw it, I just kept hearing that song in my head. And I mean, it's obviously it's a very slow paced song. But I really like the melodic pace, the mix of some pop synthesizer. It's got a whole bunch of instrumental riffs that are really interesting. And then just before the song is ending, there's a little bit of a faster riff in it, and then it goes back to the melodic tone of the song. And then the ending is absolutely perfect with a fade out, and then them all singing London Town in harmony. And they do sing, the harmonies on this song are great. So
I'm in.
really
I
like
love
this
it.
song.
Yeah, that's a
Always
little
like
mini
this song.
masterpiece. I really wanted to pick something from London Town, and I didn't. I really the song I really wanted to put in was "I'm Carrying," and it got cut. It got pushed out by other things. But I
I'm
love
Carrying
London
is
Town.
brilliant.
Yeah,
I love London Town. That's like my second favorite Wings album. So it is
That's a
what it
great
is.
album. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
picked something from London Town, but you know what? It's funny because when I went through my list, I'm looking at it. Well, you know what, Grant? Because certain records are your favorite Beatle solo records, you didn't pick that much from them individually. It's weird. I don't know. And the albums that I'm not that big of a fan of, I pick more songs off of them. Does that make
Well,
sense?
two of my favorite albums, I don't have any songs from. I mean, I'm Band on the Run. Nothing made it, although it killed me not to have 1984 on the list, but I couldn't quite squeeze it in.
Yeah.
And actually, I really like the choice that Todd made, Bluebird, and Jet, Let Me Roll. I mean, there's so many great songs, a great album,
Yeah.
but in terms of picking like my absolute favorites, it just something, as I said, 1984 would have been the one that was my favorite song in that.
It
When we're
could be.
done, we should do like a little bubbling under, and we'll talk about
Yeah.
the songs that
Okay, yeah, we'll do
Yeah,
that.
we can do that.
got
The
really,
thing,
really close.
the thing is, do you think that this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm throwing it out to the panel. Do you think that, yeah, because I think Band on the Run is brilliant, but do you think it's greater because of the sum of the parts? That if you take it apart,
Sure.
it's
that's what it is. That's why I concluded, because I was trying to think, how did I not have any songs from that album? And that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking
Okay.
the album works as a whole. Yeah.
yeah. All right,
And
cool.
some of the singles, I've got a song really, really high on my list from an album that I barely even know and I'm not crazy about. So yeah, it
Yeah.
depends.
Makes it, there you go, throwing it out there. We do want to hear from you in the chat. What do you think? Some of these albums, they're greater than some of the parts. I don't know. Throwing it out there. We do want to hear from you. All right, Todd Evans, what's your number 9? I can hardly wait.
My number 9 is Mind Games by John Lennon. And I almost wanted to, I went through a couple of Lennon songs and settled on Mind Games. I almost picked number 9 Dream, but there are some things about number 9 Dream that I don't love. And I thought about Imagine. It's funny. I was thinking about this earlier. Imagine, a lot of people think is trite because of of some of the lyrics, but it wasn't, because he really said that first. I mean, Lennon said, "Imagine there's no religion." He was the first one to say it, and everybody that said it after him was just like, it just is like, oh, people have talked about that before.
Mhm.
But so I almost wanted to pick it, but I went with Mind Games because I think Mind Games is the perfect example of the kind of really atmospheric kind of Lennon song that he was doing a lot of. Number 9 Dream is that kind of a song too, where he's kind of made this great atmosphere. It's almost like kind of a prog rocky thing, and it's not something that anybody thought that he was particularly good at. But I've always liked Mind Games a lot. It's got a feel to it that I think is kind of mysterious and almost spooky, and for that reason I really like it. But when we were talking earlier, I was thinking about this because I don't like the Plastic Ono Band album that Grant picked a song off of, because I think it's too raw. But let me throw this out for you guys. I think that John and Paul both got a slow start to their solo career, and George and Ringo didn't, which is weird. George and Ringo came out of the gate with like good, solid albums. And John, John had, the whole John and Yoko thing, and he had some things that were really experimental. and Paul had a lot of things that were recorded at home and in his bedroom and in the barn and all that stuff. It was like I always thought that was really interesting that it was like John and Paul had to kind of like ramp up to the point where they were doing the really, really good stuff.
Hmm.
And George comes out a gate, bam, with All Things Must Pass.
Yeah, but he had Wonderwall and
He did, you're
electronic
right.
sounds
He
before
did.
that. So
And
don't forget.
that sort of puts him in that category too. But I don't think that anybody thought of that as being the first George Harrison album. I could be wrong about that, but
Well, Ringo was the shocker, but
yeah,
anyway, we're gonna
Yeah,
get.
but he did Sentimental Journey, and then he did that
yeah, that's true.
album.
I always think of the Ringo album and how when I heard that
1973.
when I was a kid, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is a good album. Ringo made a good album.
I didn't choose any Ringo, though I don't
didn't
have a
either.
problem with it.
I didn't either, but I think people were. I know I was pleasantly surprised. I was a kid, but I was pleasantly surprised with how good some of Ringo's stuff was.
I'm smirking, but I'm not. We'll get there.
Okay, here we go. All right, my number 9, I'm going to go with a George Harrison track. We're going back to 1976. This is the second single from this record. I'm going to go. This is pure pop, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm a sucker for it. And I'm going to go with Cracker Box Palace because I remember when that came out. Me, just discovering the Beatles like the year before. And I was trying to take in everything I could possibly take in. And then when I hear Cracker Box Palace, hey, maybe it's not one of the best tracks ever, but when you hear stuff like this when you're a kid, holy, it makes a big impression. And I've always loved this track. It's catchy, it's memorable. George's guitar work on it is great. His slide work is wonderful. The band sounds great. I think it's probably the best song on the record, and no doubt it deserved to be a single. And I like 33 1/3 as a record as well. I think once he got signed over to Warner Brothers, that kind of rejuvenated him to some degree. And we got 33 1/3. I think it's a great record. Though I think I like the 1979 George Harrison album a little bit better, but I like Cracker Box Palace. So I'm just
I love that self-titled
Yeah.
Harrison album, and I didn't pick anything from it, and I'm kind of disappointed in
not
myself.
guilty. If
Like,
I didn't pick anything off of it, like I said, there are records that I love that I don't pick anything off of. But if I was choosing something off of that, it'd probably be Not Guilty, just for the fact that it stems the White Album and all that.
yeah,
But I do love that record. So there you go. All right, cool. All right, Dave, what's your number 8?
All right, number 8. Now I'm gonna pick a George song. I'm picking another song from 1979, and I just think that was a year that I really started getting into music and my own music. And I'm picking the lead single from the George Harrison album, "Blow Away." I just remember the song. It was just such a great driving song. There was something about it when it would come up on the radio. It just sounded great driving in the car. And the lyrics are pretty simplistic, but it just has that really catchy chorus. And you get a catchy chorus, and you get a hit song. My research indicates, I guess this song was a little more popular where I'm from in Canada, more so than the US. It hit number 7 in Canada, number 16 in the USA, so still pretty good. It's not a song that's had the lasting impact of a My Sweet Lord or something like that, but I just, as I said, I made it a point to go out and spend whatever money I had on this 45. I still have it to this day, and I think number 8's a good spot for that one. And I'm not done with George yet on this list, I'll tell you that.
No, I've got more George in my list as well.
yeah.
All right, cool. Excellent, Dave. All right, Todd, what's your next one?
All right, my next one is "Listen to What the Man Said," and yeah, I when I look at this album, I think about how 10 isn't enough places to include Magneto and Titanium Man, which I also love. But yeah, I would listen to what the man said. I think it's the arrangement really just screams 1975, but in a really positive way. And I think that soprano saxophone solo is just something that just gets in your head when you're a kid, and it's just immediately nostalgic. And I just love it. The arrangement is just sublime. It's just only a genius like Paul could do an arrangement like that.
Yeah,
Later.
That's my favorite Wings album. It's my favorite album, my favorite non-Beatles album, and that album's definitely represented on my list. And that's a fantastic song. That's a bubbling under for me. So
And that's the other thing, there's a lot of, in Paul's catalog, there's a lot of tracks that are Beatlesque. And I think Listen to What the Man Said is one of those tracks that if the Beatles were still churning out stuff at this time, it would have fit right in. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a great pick. Well, I'm not going to say that if I chose it, but we'll find out. All right. So, speaking of Wings, my number 8, I'm going to go with the follow-up single to Mulligan Tire, which I'm one of the few people probably in the United States that likes Mulligan Tire. I don't have a problem with it.
Oh, me
Yeah,
too.
I bought the 45 when it came out, and I love it. Oh, okay, so we all love it here. I don't know why people were bitching about it, but it's
No,
Not my
there are
favorite, but I
there are
like it.
people that complain about that for
Yeah.
sure.
I don't get it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I didn't choose it because there are some song tracks that are better, but it's all right. So this came out May of 77, and it's from London Town, and it was the single With a Little Luck. Again, this could have been on a Beatles album had there been a Beatles album in 1977. Catchy. The songwriting's top notch. I dig what is that, a Fender Rhodes? What's the keyboard on? Is it Fender Rhodes? I don't know. I
Yeah, I
can't.
think so.
Yeah, it sounds like a Fender Rhodes, but there's something about it. It just seems so 1977. Everything about the song, it's just perfect. And I love it. Yeah, it's probably, well, we do have a lot of keyboards on here because Paul's playing keyboards on it. Of course, Paul's playing bass, but Linda's playing keyboards on it. Benny's playing keyboards. I don't think there's really any guitars on it. Joe English is playing drums. He's still sticking around long enough to record his drum part, but it's basically all synths and keyboards, which is kind of a little bit different if you think about it. For
Yeah.
Paul to not have any guitars on here, I love it. I think it's just brilliant.
I love that song. That song is one of those ones that couldn't be done by anyone else.
No,
It doesn't,
how could
no
you
one else
even
could sound that
remake it?
way.
I don't think I've ever heard a remake of it. I don't
No.
think, and that just means to me that it's pop perfection.
Yeah.
You can't improve upon it. So that's my number 8.
Yeah, it was a hard cut for me, for sure.
Yeah. All
Great
right,
song.
Dave, what's your
All right.
number 7?
So time to pay respect to Mr. Lennon. And so what's my favorite song by John Lennon? I'm going with number 9, Dream. And I'll go that at number 7. That's the one I'm picking to represent the Lennon solo catalog. So I was thinking, why didn't John Lennon make the list? So probably, when you think about I watched the NFL draft on ESPN, they talk about a run on positions, but I think where would John's run on come? It would probably, if I was ranking these songs like up to 50, he would probably start somewhere between 18 and 24. All of a sudden you'd see a bunch of them bunched in there. But anyway, this one I think is a really amazing song. It starts off with that haunting, melodic, beautiful instrumental opening, and it's very cool and original. And his singing, it feels like you're in a dream when he's singing. I mean, that's that, and the song actually came to him in a dream. A regular musician who seems to like to show up on Beatles records and albums is Nicky Hopkins. He plays on this. Another musician I want to just shout out to who appears on this song, Kenny Asher. Who's Kenny Asher? He co-wrote a lot of Paul Williams songs, including the Muppet movie soundtrack with him. And this song reached number 9 on Billboard in the USA, peaked at 23 in Great Britain and 35 in Canada. So it was most popular in the United States, interestingly enough, for that particular track. So great song. That's my tribute to John on this list.
All right. Hey, I can't argue with that. So excellent, Dave. Oh, I appreciate it. All right, Todd, what's next?
Okay, well, this is number 7 is where we finally hear from this thing, which my copy looks like most copies look. It's got tape on it and there's some water damage, and this is a typical copy of All Things Must Pass. But I from this album picked, and I went through a couple of tracks, but I settled on Let It Down. And I think Let It Down is really cool because it starts out like this big stadium rocker, and then it shifts into this like easy listening, like really 70s sounding thing. And then it kind of shifts back and forth between those two things. And there are a lot of great songs from that album. I mean, I almost picked Run of the Mill. I almost picked All Things Must Pass. I almost picked What Is Life. But Let It Down, I thought, was the coolest song out of all of those. So That's what I picked for my number 7.
That's
It doesn't
brilliant.
get talked about much, but I think that's a pretty epic
No, I
song.
think that's great. I like it that some of you guys are picking some stuff that's a little bit more deeper in the catalog. I keep looking at my list and I'm going, Grant, these all look like singles. What you're just so, I don't know.
Oh, I get there too.
Okay. I think that's a good choice. Now, my choice for my number 7, I lied earlier because, when I'm hosting the show, I'm kind of brain dead. But I did choose something from that George Harrison album from 1979, and I didn't choose Not Guilty, even though I mentioned it. And I'm going to go with what Dave was saying. He picked Blow Away, and that's my number 7. I'm looking at my list. Of course, I don't have my glasses on, so that always screws with me. But anyway, I'm going to go Blow Away because it is a perfect pop song. This has to be the best track on the album. And of course, no doubt it has to be the single. But do you know he really wrote that about his house and how it had a leaky roof? Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
He was worried that he's going to become blown away. But anyway, it's good. I don't know if this was that during this time he was already with his current wife. He'd already got a divorce from Patty, right? By this 79?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm surprised that when he bought Friar Park so early on that he would still have roofing issues by this time in 79.
Right.
No, sir. Of course, I don't know when he wrote it. Maybe it was an old song, but I'm thinking, geez, George, you had this house for 10 years. You're writing a song about the roof?
Maybe the maintenance, which wasn't a big priority for him.
Maybe not. But you got
to fix it though.
But it's, George playing 12-string guitar, slide guitar. You got Andy Newmark on drums, Ray Cooper playing production. George uses a lot of the same people over and over again. But I remember this was a pretty big single in the US. It got up to 16 on the Billboard Hot 100. And I just distinctly remember it playing it. And I'm just going, God, I was just hooked because it really is not that far off from being a Beatles track. So I'm very simple, ladies and gentlemen. Very simple. All right, cool. Let's throw it over to Dave. Dave, what is your number 6?
So actually, Todd teed it up for me. I picked Magneto and Titanium Man from Venus and Mars.
Good. I'm glad it got picked.
This is a real fun song. So this was actually the B-side of Rock Show, didn't chart. It's about Stan Lee created superhero. Stan Lee himself gave it a stamp of approval. And I think at the time when he made the song, I don't think Paul McCartney would have imagined that Marvel would basically take over movies. But anyway, this song is just a lot of fun. I just love the upbeat tone. Paul's mix of singing and then his little bit of a side talking. He's having a great time with this song. You can see it, and he uses sort of like that screechy tone singing to perfection in the right spots in this one. This is. I mean, as I said, this is my favorite Wings album. It's one of my favorite albums. If we were to do a top 10 of the 70s overall, I'm pretty sure this would make. I know this would make it. I mean, this is my favorite Wings album. It was hard. I've got 2 on here, but it was hard to only pick 2. So there's my pick.
I can't argue with that. All right, Todd, what's your number 7?
Well, I always do. I tend to do this. I'm going to pick something that's going to annoy people and people who don't like Paul McCartney and people who don't like Paul McCartney's 80s era. I am picking something from this. Press to play. And what I'm picking, and I'm going to go on my usual soapbox rant about this. I'm picking Only Love Remains. And I want to challenge people who are watching this show to listen to this track because it's absolutely beautiful. And I really had a lot of problem during this era with people giving Paul McCartney crap about having too many ballads because he's brilliant at it. And I think it was a real shame that when he stopped doing that because he was getting so much heat for it, that we could have got some more really good ones. But Only Love Remains is absolutely gorgeous. It's got a string arrangement by Tony Visconti, which which surprised me. And it's very very George Martin-esque to my ears, and the string arrangement is just really beautiful. And this album ends with a song called "However Absurd," which also has a string arrangement by Ann Dudley, which is really cool. And I almost picked that too. But Only Love Remains. If I was actually being honest and didn't want to get too many negative comments, I would have put it higher. But
You
I
got to be
absolutely love
honest,
this
Todd.
song.
It's no big deal. Put it where you want to put it.
I absolutely love this song. I think number 6 is about right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I agree with you. I like the ballads of that era. I mean, I think "So Bad" and "No More Lonely Nights"
Oh
those were
yeah,
great
No More
songs.
Lonely
That was that
Nights.
era, and those. I mean, hey, Grant's had me on the show before. I like the ballads. It's
Yeah.
yeah, Dave's all full of saccharin and syrupy. He
there
knows
you
all.
go.
You know what's funny? I used to say something during that time. I used to say, let 45-year-old Paul McCartney be 45-year-old Paul McCartney. I was like, because it was just like that was expected out of somebody who was in their 40s to mellow out just a little bit. And I used to always just think, why does Paul McCartney have to be such a rocker? I mean, and he did change his outputs to appease some of those critics. I mean, he did the Russian album and he changed
I'll look it
some
back to the
things
egg.
up. Yeah, he
He was
changed some
getting a
things
lot of
up. And I
critique.
don't I wish
Yeah.
he hadn't done that. I wish he hadn't listened to anyone and just been Paul McCartney.
Mhm. What do you think of Eric Stewart's work on this record?
I'm not crazy about it. I'm not crazy about Press to Play as an album.
Okay.
Um, Phil Collins is on it. Phil Collins is on the song Angry, which I don't think is a very good song, but you know how much I love Phil Collins. Pretty Little Head is really weird. I like it. And that's one of the songs with Stewart on it. But I think Press is good. I think there is just it. I was looking at the reviews of this album, and some of the reviews said that they didn't like the album that much, but they thought that it was very interesting work and that it sounded like he was kind of challenging himself. And I kind of agree with that. But I definitely don't think it's a bad album. But I'm wearing the t-shirt and uh Capitol put this out. And in the late 80s, we've talked about this before, Grant.
We have.
Capitol dropped the ball with a lot of things, and they dropped the ball with this. There was no reason that after Tug of War and Pipes of Peace that this album couldn't have done better. I think they didn't know what to do with it. And I can remember working in a record store and that album that's behind me back there, Pipes of Peace. I remember opening boxes and people forming a line behind me and having to hand it to customers as the box opened because Paul McCartney albums were event albums in the 80s. I mean,
I know. We had
people,
that.
like, without the internet, people knew the dates and would come to the store on the release date to buy those albums. So I blame Capitol for the failure of this. It's not his strongest record, but I think it's strong enough to have done better than it did.
Yeah, Pipes of Peace is another one of those records that gets a lot of hate. But look, I've got the box
Not
set.
for me.
I don't have any problem with Pipes of Peace.
It's coming up.
All right, good. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There you go.
That's
All
a
right.
nice set. I don't have that one.
I don't have them all. I've got Red Rose Speedway. What else do I have? Wildlife. I don't know. I've got some. I don't have a lot. I've got some. I don't have the ones that go for a big money. Let's say that. All right. So number 7, that's where we're at. God, I can't remember.
Number 6.
Oh, no. Okay. Number 6. Okay. My number 6, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go with yet another George Harrison track. We're going from 1981, and it was a tribute to John Lennon, and we've got Ringo playing on it. I think Paul's on there and Linda doing backing ground vocals. So, it's almost a Beatles release, but I'm going to go with all those years ago. And I don't think that the album so much is so great, but you have to admit, all those years ago is a phenomenal song. Got to number 2 on the Billboard charts. I mean, it was the perfect song for after, Lennon getting assassinated, of course. No wonder it was successful. But I think it's a great song, and I think it's one of George's best tracks.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good song.
Great choice.
It's a great choice. I think it needs mentioned. I mean, it's a beautiful song.
Yeah, it's a bubbling under for me for sure.
Right.
Yeah, same
So
here.
there you go. So there you go. That's my pick. All right. Dave, you're up.
Number 5, right? Okay, so number 5, I'm going with the lead single from Living in the Material World, Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth. Now, when I originally did the list, this song wasn't on it. And I'm kind of listening to songs all week. And then I was taking another listen to this, and I said, oh my God, am I crazy? Not only should this song be on the list, it's got to be rated high. It's fantastic. You get it all with this. You get all kinds of great guitar riffs by George, and you get some great piano. It's and here's another nice thing. This song did reach #1, and I think that was a nice thing because after the whole controversy with My Sweet Lord, no controversies on this one. This is George's song. Nobody can question anything. And when at the concert for George 1 year after his death, this was what Jeff Lynne actually performed. So I just think this song just sounds fantastic, amazing. You get it all. You get fantastic vocals, all kinds of great musician work, and it's outstanding song. My #5. There you go. There it is.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
All right.
Great choice.
Super. Okay. Excellent. All right. Todd, what's your next one?
All right. Once again, I'm going to this era, and I am picking Keep Undercover. I don't know how many casual fans are aware of this song, but speaking of clever arrangements, this song is brilliant. I mean, it's not very long. I think it's right around 3 minutes, but the amount of things that happen in this song, Keep Undercover, is just amazing, and it's really well played, and it's really everything in it is clever from beginning to end. So if you haven't given this a listen in a while, definitely try it again. There's actually a couple of songs I almost picked Average Person, but I decided to go with Keep Undercover instead. I think this is a great album, and I have heard people say that they don't like the songs that Michael Jackson is on, but I think they're both great. I've heard people say that they like Say 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 and they don't like The Man, which I don't understand how anybody could not like The Man. I think that's an amazing song. I didn't pick it, but I picked Keep Undercover.
There's just too many tracks.
Yeah.
And I'm sure with, everybody else in the panel, your ranking could change tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, all right. Excellent, Todd. That's cool. All right. My next pick, we're going to 1976 from an album that traditionally everyone thinks has a lot of filler on. It's not so much Paul McCartney based, but everybody on this record gets to contribute. But that being said, the tracks that Paul contribute to this record are let's say this, absolutely stunning stuff. I'm going to go with Wings' Let 'Em In. When I was a kid and this was out, I couldn't get enough of this. In fact, there's another track that obviously we'll talk about that too. You may laugh, but you might not. But it is a perfect record. But Let 'Em In, come on, it's minimalistic. You've got, Paul's pretty much just playing piano and doing backing vocals, but you just got Jimmy McCullough playing bass. Denny's playing military drums. It's just kind of an odd thing. Linda's singing backgrounds. It's very minimalistic in its production, but the melodies, the way it's put together, it's sugary pop goodness.
Yeah, another song that nobody else could have done. Only Paul McCartney.
I mean, I could have rated it higher, but
yeah.
Gee, many Christmas. When you're dealing with 4 different individuals and you're trying to compile something, but how could I not leave Let 'Em In off of this ranking? Absolutely stunning. I love it. So there you go.
Yeah, that was one of those albums for most of my life that I thought was just kind of a mess. It was kind of a hodgepodge. There's too many people, too many different people doing too many different things, too many different people singing. And then one day when I was working on a show, was that your show, Grant, about ranking the Wings albums?
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah,
that was me.
I decided I was just going to put on headphones and listen to Speed of Sound all the way through. And when I did it, I was like, I like every song in this album.
Yeah, that's my first Wings album that I owned. Somebody gave it to me as a present at the time, and I like every song on that album.
I've done a complete
funny thing is, none of them made the
reassessment of it.
list. It's kind of like a Band on the Run thing. I just like all. I mean, there's some fantastic deep tracks on that album too, like The Note She Wrote and Beware My Love, which is a Denny song.
I wish, I really can't. I look at it now, and let me look at the tracks real quick. I'm trying to get them up.
Let 'Em In's my favorite out of all of them.
Beware of My Love.
That's my favorite
fantastic.
one. That's a Denny song.
It's great. Silly Love Songs, of course, is great. I could do without Cook of the House, but that's okay. Time to Hide's Denny Lane. Must Do Something About It. That's lead vocals by Joe. I mean, I think this record's probably aged a lot better than when you looked at it back in the day. I really don't have an issue with it. I think people have an issue because Paul kind of let every other band member have a little bit more say than him controlling the shots. That's probably the problem. But yeah, Cook of the House, though, I don't really have to listen to
It goes
again,
by
but
quick.
It goes by quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 2:39. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay. But Let 'Em In, which leads off the record, I love it. So that's my pick. All right, Dave, let's keep it moving.
All right, let's go top four, and I'm going to go with a big hit for Mr. Ringo Starr, and I'll go with It Don't Come Easy. So it was released as a single, no album, and I think Ringo was kind of the, in some ways, the ugly stepchild of the Beatles. He was the one that people would have expected the least from, and he was one of the first ones to have a hit. In fact, it was #1 in Canada, #4 in USA and UK, and as I said, he was the ugly stepchild in that, people just sort of said, he was lucky to be there type of thing. But when he sang songs, they were great songs. Yellow Submarine, Octopus's Garden, with a little help from my friends, it was there. I quite liked his vocals, and I said, like, all those songs. It's not that surprising to me. He came up with like a nice little hooky poppy type hit. Great riff to start, and leads into his vocals. And you just get that one. And George Harrison was this the one that he co-wrote. Okay, on Photograph, we'll get there. Apparently George Harrison did assist him with writing the song, but he wasn't given the credit. But anyway, George played guitar, Ringo did some drumming, we got some horns, some tambourines, we got a whole thing going on here, and I think we've got a heck of a pop song.
Yes, I agree. All right, cool. All right, Todd, what you got? What's your next one?
All right, my number 4 is from my favorite Wings album, Back to the Egg, and it is Arrow Through Me.
Oh yeah.
I can't say enough good things about this song. What a super creative arrangement this is. Again, it's one of those horn arrangements that could only be on a Paul McCartney song. Only he would have the idea to do the horns the way they're done on this song. And it's so cool. It's got this really cool kind of laid back groove to it, but then it's got that horn arrangement that's kind of quirky and weird. It's just perfect song to end a side with. A really strong side. I mean, I could go on and on about how great side 1 of Back to the Egg is, but yeah, Arrow Through Me, definitely my favorite song on this album, and that is my number 4.
I can't argue with that as well. All these records are great. Jeez, it's hard to
Should have been a
even rank
monster
them.
hit. It was a hit, but not a big enough one, in my opinion.
All right, I'm going to go back to 1971 and to Ram, Paul and Linda McCartney. There's a lot on this record that I could pick because I think this is one of his best records. Don't listen to Rolling Stone when they were brutalizing this record back in the day when they had a beef with Paul McCartney. They were pissed that he broke up the Beatles, and Jan Wenner, for God's sakes. Anyway, I'm going to go with Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey. Come on. If we're wanting, this is like something that could have been on Abbey Road, for crying out loud. Put this in the medley. Every bit is good. In fact, there's really not anything on this record. When you look at this album, I could have pulled more stuff off of it. It's absolutely a brilliant record and a great 45. Looking, what did this rank on the charts? It had fared pretty well. I mean, here we go. It got up to #1. So my case is closed. But back then, the people still wanted the Beatles. We're talking 1971. They weren't done yet, So, yeah, great single off a great record. So that's my number 4. All right, Dave, I'm throwing it over to you.
Okay, back to number 3. All right, so I'm now going to pick something that was mentioned earlier, and that's "What Is Life" by George Harrison. So this was actually originally the B-side to the controversial "My Sweet Lord." It's an up-tempo soul tune. You've got quite an all-star musicians playing on it, including Eric Clapton. It's kind of a spiritual song without being religious, and it starts out great with a fuzz tone guitar riff, catches you right away. It sounds great in movies. I mean, here's a list of movies it's been in: Goodfellas, Patch Adams, Big Daddy, Away We Go, This Is 40, Instant Family. And I've seen some of these movies, I've seen the way it's played in, and said, yeah, this just works. I mean, he didn't mean for that to happen, but some songs just work great in the films. It reached number 10 on Billboard, and yeah, my third favorite. I think it's just put that on any time. Great song.
Can't argue with it. All right, cool, excellent. Todd, what's your number? What's your next one? I guess we're
My
on
number 3 is Take It Away from Toy 4. An album that I think is, I've warmed up to it lately, but I think it's kind of uneven, but I like Pipes of Peace a little better. But Take It Away, you know, I'm not even going to say very much about Take It Away other than the last minute of it is absolute McCartney, George Martin magic. And it starts, the instrumental part that I'm talking about, it starts like right at 58 before the end. It's almost exactly a minute. And that horn arrangement and those background vocals, I'll tell you what, that is, Linda's really important to that sound that he was getting then. And I think she's like the secret weapon. I think when she was no longer with us, you could tell in McCartney's output. And she might not have ever have done one thing really, really, really well, but to me, she has to be in that background vocal mix for it to have that magical McCartney 70s and 80s sound. And Take It Away is just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned her vocal mix because of the certain blend of her and Paul together.
Yeah.
Actually, if you think about this, Todd, the vocal blend of Denny, Paul, and Linda all
Yes.
together.
Yeah.
And once Denny left the fold, well, of course, Linda didn't do quite as much as she always had in the past with the Wings catalog, but I think we lacked a lot. There was something magical about those three individuals singing together.
Yeah, I was really, when I was like preparing for this, I was kind of listening back and thinking, God, they have great harmonies. That's what hit me this week. I didn't really pay as much attention to it before. But
I mean, Linda by herself, I don't think's all that great, but some people, now this has been brought out before. I don't want to go down a prog rabbit hole, but it's been brought to my attention, and you can probably fill in the blank. You know, Steve Howe has a really cannot sing a lick, but somehow when you put Steve Howe in together with John Anderson and Chris Squire.
Oh yeah, I know where you're going with that. Yeah.
There's something about the vocal blend. It's like Crosby, Stills and Nash, same kind of thing. Of course, all those guys can sing, but I don't think Steve Howe really has a great voice.
No.
Linda doesn't have a great voice, but something about the vocal blend. And I'm going to bring up another person. Now, Stevie Nicks has done a lot of sessions, and I don't think particularly that she's a great vocalist. Maybe it's her songwriting. Maybe it's Lindsey Buckingham and what he knew what to do with Stevie that made her so great.
Oh, absolutely. You are speaking my language right now.
Okay. All right. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is a tangent. So beware. Okay. But Stevie's done a lot of sessions. I'm going to say, let's look at, oh, I'm having a brain crisis. Who did Magnet and Steel? Help me.
Walter Regan.
Walter
Regan. Yeah.
I knew that. I've got that CD, but when you get to my age, kids, it's hard to bring it out of your brain. But think about it. She's doing backgrounds on there, and Lindsay's on there too. But when she does like a background vocal, I mean, she's done a lot of stuff. She's all over those first two Walter Egan albums. Even though I don't think she sounds great by herself, but something about the way she sounds blending with other people, it enhances the backgrounds because she's that unique. So that's kind of thing with Linda.
You've got another example of that would be Linda Ronstadt on Warren Zevon albums. I'm not particular. I think Linda Ronstadt is wonderful and she's a very talented woman.
Well, think about
I'm not a big fan of her own work.
Right.
But when she is in the mix, you're like, oh, she's essential to that.
Old Man, Neil Young, she's doing the backgrounds on there.
Yep.
You couldn't do it without her because
no, you couldn't.
She really makes the backgrounds that she provides are incredible. So Linda, as much crap as she gets, was very important to the sound of Wings.
Yeah, I think so too. And another thing too, tangent number 3.
That's all right. We're good. Tangents.
You know, you sometimes hear people talk about how, people who aren't a fan of Fleetwood Mac will be like, oh, what's the big deal about Fleetwood Mac? I'm so tired, so burnt out on Fleetwood Mac. The thing about Fleetwood Mac that's amazing is you've got Lindsey Buckingham with this really weird voice, and you've got Stevie Nicks with this really weird voice, and you've got Christine McVie with this really beautiful, angelic, not weird voice, and then you put the three of them together, and you get this strange, wonderful thing. And to me, that's kind of what Linda is to McCartney's stuff.
See, this is like a show within a show, ladies and gentlemen. You're getting 2 shows,
And
the price of one.
Last thing I'm going to say about this, and when Flaming Pie came out, an album that is not represented on my list,
And not on mine either.
I missed her.
Yeah.
There was something magical missing.
And I love Flaming Pie. That's one of my favorite Paul solo albums. I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant.
I missed Linda on it.
Yeah. Still brilliant. All right. Who was talking? Was it me or was it you, Todd?
I picked Take It Away, so I think it's your number 3.
Well, very good. We get on these conversations and then I can't keep track.
I'm glad I wrote these down.
Yeah, because it's crazy. All right. All right. So my number 3, and this is getting hard. I think I'm pretty satisfied with this. I do believe that, Todd, you mentioned this track, or was it Dave? I can't remember. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of control. I'm going to go with Wings off of Venus and Mars and listen to what the man said, which I
picked that. That was my number 8.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. It is Beatlesque. It could have fit on a Beatles album with no problem. The only thing that kind of drives me crazy about the track is that there was something to do with the recording of it, that the whole album sounds kind of janky, and it's not as far as sound quality, it's no audiophile favorite. It's kind of murky, kind of muddy. It's kind of like you would have thought that Phil Spector was involved.
Yeah, and it's funny.
But he's not.
The part of that album that I think is the worst part is the end of side 1, Letting Go. The remastered CD, the Paul McCartney collection CD, helps a little, but on the vinyl, I don't know whether it's just crushed too much at the end of the side, but at the end, the inner groove section on that album on both sides is really, really rough.
But looking at the lineup, Paul's playing bass, of course, and it's also brilliant. Linda's on keyboards, backgrounds, Denny's playing guitar, vocals. It's the typical Wings lineup from this era. Got a little Tom Scott sax solo. Yeah. I think it's great. I love it. So I must like it because it's my number 3. It could change. So, all right, cool. Let's keep going.
All right.
Because we're already over, but that's all right. We'll get there. All right, Dave, what's your number 2?
So I'm going to go back to what I already said is my favorite Wings album, and I'm going with kind of a combo song, Venus and Mars Rock Show. So one thing I never got to see in my life was Paul McCartney and Wings play live. I really would have liked to have been able to see that. I have seen the Wings Over America video. It's actually, for anyone who wants to see that, it is available on Tubi. But I can only imagine sitting in the audience, because I also know the Wings Over America album, and having that Venus and Mars, that slow track to begin, and that build up to the beginning of the rock show to what's a very fast rock song. It blends in perfectly. I would have loved to have had. I'd like to go back in time, be able to sit back and watch that particular concert and be in the audience, because he does a combination. He does all kinds of songs from Venus and Mars, but he also does the Band on the Run stuff. He does some of the other stuff we talked about on Uncle Albert. He does a whole bunch of Beatles in it. I mean, that must have been amazing. I'm not young, but I'm too young to have seen the Beatles live, but I probably could have maybe squeezed in a wing somewhere along the way. Definitely I could have.
Well,
for that,
I could have.
Yeah, for that show, I would have been about, I think about 12 or 13, something like that. So that's about, my first concert was the Beach Boys when I was 13 years old. So anyway, I think, he created this specifically to open up his show. And, and that's why you hear things like Madison Square and Hollywood Bowl. And it's a great opener. I mean, there are, musicians throughout time that have come up with great openers. One of the most simplest was done by Cheap Trick, the Hello There. They go into all their stuff.
Yeah.
But I think this is a fantastic opener. So too bad. Never got to see them live, but hey, the video's out there.
There you go. All right, cool, Dave. Excellent. All right, Todd, what's your number two?
All right, my number two is Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth. I think that this is as great as All Things Must Pass is. This comes right after it, and it is, I think this is his best single. And this was one of the first records I ever bought. I was 9 years old, and I didn't buy it, of course. Mom bought it for me, I'm
Of
sure.
course.
But Miss Odell on the B side there. And yeah, I just think this song is absolutely perfect. I think it's one of the most perfect pop songs, and I think it's pro probably George's best song. It is so catchy and so memorable, and I've never gotten tired of it. And again, we were talking about this earlier from an album, Living in the Material World, that I'm not very familiar with. I'm going to start really diving into that one because that is not an album that I really spent much time with. But this song I really love. So that's my number two.
Number two, good. All right. I'm looking at my number two and I'm looking at my number one, and I
You gonna
think I'm
flip
good.
flop them?
No, I think I'm gonna leave it. But I think these would always be they could flip on another day, but today this is where they line up. And I'm picking yet another song from Wings at the Speed of Sound. And I'm gonna go with the single Silly Love Songs because for one, when I was a kid, this was out and I couldn't get enough of it. In fact, I can still listen to this single today and I never turn it off. I listen to it all the way through. This it has to have one of Paul McCartney's best bass parts
Yeah.
ever. Memorable. I love the thing about the Paul McCartney solo catalog that I like is that, people expect him to play bass. He always takes the bass, his playing, and mix it up hot in the mix, which I just
Mhm.
totally dig. Because all of Paul's bass lines are always well thought out. They sound great. And I don't think there's any better bass line. Okay, there might be some great bass line. There's some great bass lines on the Beatles catalog. But for the 70s Paul McCartney, this is his best work.
And not
Now,
only is it up in the mix, but it's also there's space made for it. So
yeah,
like it's like he got everything else out of the way so that it would stand out.
yeah, it's perfect. It's a perfect pop song.
I mean, I remember when these songs were on the radio too, and
Yeah.
you think about that particular time. If you listen to, if you had your radio station tuned to a pop radio station, what did you hear? You heard all disco, but you heard those two songs quite a bit, in
Mhm.
spite of the disco era. Yeah,
Right.
what I remember hearing was a lot of Let 'Em In, a lot of silly love songs, and then a lot of ELO back in those days as well.
Yeah,
And other than that, it was all disco.
Mhm.
it's true. ELO was big during this time. But like you
Yeah.
mentioned, Todd, this was a whole reaction. Everybody said that all he was writing were these love songs, these
Right,
silly,
right.
sappy.
This is the early stage of that, of him getting criticized for that. And
So
it's,
then he wrote this.
I like that. I like this comeback much more than the one that came later, which was basically to bash out a bunch of rockin' songs.
Mhm. Yeah, at least this way we're talking about it lyrically.
Right.
So I'll give Paul kudos for that, but I think it's phenomenal. He was on fire. Ever since, Band on the Run through this whole period. Oh, God, it's so good. But anyway, all right. So that was my number two. Let's get to our number one. Dave, we've
My,
reached that magical moment.
we have, and my number one is an upset special, the Beatle least likely, and I am
Ringo
going with
Starr.
I'm going with an all-out pop hit, Photograph. And hey, your audience, Grant, might laugh and go, I can't believe
No
that guy
one's going to
picked a Ringo
laugh.
song. I can't believe that guy picked a pop hit like that. But this song is, if I have to pick one song and say, hey, you've got to pick one non-Beatles song, it's like it's not even a question for me. I want to listen to Photograph. It's so unique. The theme of it is like this sad power ballad, and yet it's got like this upbeat tone to it.
Mhm.
And again, it was a big shocker. Ringo Starr had a huge hit. 2 million copies sold of this song. Nobody would have expected that out of Ringo, especially so early in the game. And he nails it. He plays the drums, he sings the song, he does, and then you've got a 2-for-1 with this. It's actually co-written by George Harrison. Um, and while I was preparing for the show, I was kind of looking to see who else sang the song. I actually heard a version by Engelbert Humperdinck. Ringo does it better, but it was kind of fun to listen to that. So, and I mentioned Nicky Hopkins. He plays on this as well. He seemed to be like the musician for hire for ex Beatles. So
During
yeah,
this
that's my
period,
number
yeah, he
one.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I can't argue with that. We all
Yeah.
like what we like, and just the fact that you gave Ringo that number one slot, I admire you. That's great. Awesome. Super. God dang, that's good. All right, Todd, what's your number one?
And before I go into my number one, I want to say that I've talked about this before on a different show. There are artists that have come up with rock songs that actually become standards. I mean, you think about
Yeah.
Billy Joel, Piano Man, and New York State of Mind.
Mhm.
You think about with Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Photograph is almost one of those songs. I mean, if Engelbert Humperdinck sang it, who knows? It's one of those things that Frank Sinatra could have sung it, Tony Bennett could have sung it. It's really close to being a standard. And
I mentioned What
he
Is
deserves
Life.
credit for that. And George.
I mentioned What Is Life before, just quickly. I forgot to mention this. You know who sang that one? I found a cover was Olivia Newton-John. She did a cover in it, and she did it in her early kind of country pop days, and that was before she became like a pop star, right? Olivia Newton-John actually was Taylor Swift before there was Taylor Swift. It was the same kind of same type of succession in her career, where she went from country, kind of bordering on country pop star,
Oh my
to
God,
all out pop star. Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. Neil Morrison, Mike Portnoy do a good cover of What Is Life too. And as you guys know, I like to shove Neil Morrison to every show I possibly can. But yeah, there's a lot of good covers of that.
And there
All
you
right.
go. He
So-
did shove it into this show too.
I did.
So
I
there-
managed to shoehorn Neil Morrison there. Okay, so my number one is Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. Now, I want to say I'm not one of those people that thinks that Ram is one of Paul's best albums. I think that Ram is very charming, but I almost feel like Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey is the standard to which I think people expected him to perform. And I think that being on this album really sort of makes the album. I like the rest of the album, but I think Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey really stands out. And Grant, you mentioned that it could have been on the Abbey Road medley. It almost is the Abbey Road medley.
Well,
It's like
all
you
right.
take the Abbey Road medley and you squash it down to like 4.5 minutes, and that's what this is. I mean, it changes. It has so many changes. It has those silly voices. We're so sorry. When I was a kid, I thought those
I thought it was
fake voices were amazing. I thought it was
I love it.
funny,
Yeah.
and it appealed to me. I can remember sitting in the car on my way to I lived in Buffalo, and my grandmother lived in Pennsylvania, and we used to drive in the car. And I can remember listening to this song on the radio in the car, and just my 8-year-old brain trying to process what was happening. I was like, what is this weird song? It's everything about it is so weird. And it just it became part of my memories of that time in a really big way. And I just think it's brilliant. And it's so, I mean, it's been mainstream. It's been like normalized because it was a number one song. But sometimes you have to like kind of step out of that and think, this is a really weird song, like in the best possible way. It's amazing that a song like that got to number one.
People still wanted.
They wanted the Beatles. Yeah,
They wanted that, and that was
the
the closest thing
right
that came out during that time that was even Beatlesque.
Yep.
I mean, Pepperish, Abbey
Right.
Road, that
Right.
production Beatles. So yeah, I get it. All right, cool, excellent. All right, my number one, and I can't imagine there would be anything else to take the place here. I'm gonna have to go with Maybe I'm Amazed. Take whatever version you want. People are more used to the live version. I'll take the version off of McCartney because, for one, I think Paul's solo, even though Jimmy McCullough's playing it on the live version on Wings Over America, I think that Paul's guitar solo on McCartney, I think it's killer because Paul McCartney, who's the best guitar player in the Beatles? Well, it's Paul. Who's the best bass player in the Beatles? Well, it's Paul. All those, I'm on a rant, but listen to all those solos that Paul played on the Beatles stuff. The guy, he's just kind of a wild player. It's kind of unhinged and just kind of, I don't want to say freeform. What am I trying to say? What would I call Paul McCartney as a player? Very energetic and just very, I don't know how to call it. He's so unique in his guitar playing.
I
But he
think the
could,
three of them, I mean, you've got three people,
right?
John, Paul, and George, that have very distinct tone. I mean,
Correct.
George probably the most distinct, but they each have their own thing. And Paul, people don't think about Paul's guitar playing, but Paul also has that solo in that you were just talking about from the
Hmm.
McCartney album. Perfect example.
Perfect
It's just like,
example. It just seems he's just kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, not free spirit, but just kind of, I don't know what the word is. I can't come up with it. But when he plays, like on the Beatles tracks, you can tell when he's playing the solo
mhm.
because there's a certain energy. There's just like it's just like the solo could just fly off into outer
Yeah.
space at any time. That's what I'm going to say. And so you kind of get that on Maybe I'm Amazed, but it's well thought out. Jimmy McCullough in duplicating the solo thinks he does a great job. Um, but I think Maybe I'm Amazed. I don't know if this was written during Abbey Road or when Paul wrote it, but it could have fit on any Beatles album and it would have been just top notch. I'm glad we finally got it on the McCartney album, and I'm glad we have a live version on Wings Over America because really, probably the Wings Over America version is the definite version. I mean, it was released as a single. Um, what did that get up to on the charts? It got up to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. It did much better here than it did in the UK. Huh, well, be darned. But anyway, I think it has to be his best solo track. That's just me. A lot of people love this song, and I still think it gets played today. So I'm gonna go. Maybe I'm Amazed. Is it overplayed? Maybe.
I don't think it is.
It gets played a ton today, and I'm surprised it was only. If you would have asked me, I would have thought it was a top 5 hit or something. But
Yeah, got to number 10.
sometimes you don't know.
Problem is, I can't tell by looking at this ranking if it's okay. Yeah, 1977 live album version got up to number 10. I don't know if it was ever released originally off of McCartney. Were there any singles on that record? His first solo record? I don't remember. Hmm.
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, there you go. That's my number one. Anybody else have any honorable mentions or anything else to add?
Well, mine,
Maybe
I've got a bunch of Johns, Just Like Starting Over, Beautiful Boy, Imagine. I mean, those all would have been nice to find us a place. I mean, Love and Song, I like quite a bit. We've talked about some of these other songs. Oh, Old Siam. I don't think anybody's
Oh
mentioned that one
yeah.
today.
Oh, I love all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that is
a great one.
way underrated.
Todd mentioned Arrow Through Me. Say, the one he did with Michael Jackson. I
Yeah.
think Todd mentioned that one, but yeah, mainly I would go with the John ones. I mean, those are some of the ones that stand out for me.
All right, cool. All right, Todd, go ahead.
I had It Don't Come Easy, Jet, Watching the Wheels. That was probably the closest one, but there's some things about the production that I'm not super crazy about, so it got bumped. Getting Closer, Maybe I'm Amazed in Another Day is what I had as
Yeah.
my 10
So
through
what is it about watching the wheel?
11 to 16.
What is it about the production you don't like?
I just think that it's kind of that the John songs on that album, they sound really good, but there's something that's a little bit kind of cheesy about them. I think what I'm not crazy about I like the way the drums sound and I like the way the band sounds
Mhm.
on Watching the Wheels, but there's some of the little things at the end that where it doesn't quite sound like a merry-go-round when he says on the merry-go-round, but it's close to it, and I think it's kind of cheesy. I don't like the airport voice and in starting over, just like starting over. I always thought that was cheesy. So I'm not. Is it who is that again? Who produced that? Is it Jack
Jack
Douglas?
Douglas, yeah.
Yeah. It sounds good, but I wouldn't have commercialized it quite as much as he did.
Yeah, there is something about that album.
And there's something about Watching the Wheels that is a little bit. Let's see. What do I write about? What have I been doing? I've been hanging out at home with my family. Let me just come up with some words that I'm just sitting here watching stuff happen. It's sweet. It's a sweet sentiment, but I don't think that it's really groundbreaking work, and that's why I cut it. But
Mhm.
It seems to me though that Double Fantasy album, that's the one where he really kind of like put it all together and put together what was really necessary to have that huge pop hit album that was just like, record breaking. So, I don't know if it's a taboo conversation to start, like how much of that was his, unfortunate ending. And I don't think a whole lot of it. I think that album was no matter what would have been the huge success it was. I mean, it sold maybe 1 million less copies or something, maybe, but I think that album did have huge hit written all over it. It just had like the formula on it. I think just worked very well for radio, rock radio, pop radio, everything.
Yeah, at the time.
Well,
Though I'm
remember,
not.
that's the beginning of Geffen Records, basically. And I think that David Geffen really wanted that to be successful.
And how could it not after not have anything?
Not having anything for so long, right?
So it's fine. I'm not a big fan of the production. All right. It just seems like there's something missing. And I don't know if that's Jack Douglas. I can't imagine that. But, the fact that you did bring Cheap Trick in to back him and you didn't use any of those tracks because it was probably too heavy.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Is that what they did? Was that there were some tracks that didn't make it that were
But they came out on the box set.
okay.
But I'd much rather had Cheap Trick on being the backup band than anybody else. But
It's really funny. I criticized Plastic Ono Band for being too raw, but I also think that help me out, or Double Fantasy is actually like too much in the other direction. It's
I
too
agree. I agree.
So,
but thank God it
I'm
doesn't
never
sound.
satisfied.
But at least it doesn't sound like Phil Spector.
No, that is a plus.
That's why I didn't really pick anything. I just can't sit through it. It's just so murky and muddy and no definition. It's basically just mono recording with I know it sounds terrible, but that's the way
All
I
Things
feel.
Must Pass is good despite that because of the quality of the songs and the players that are on it.
Yeah, All Things
Must Pass could have been better,
me.
I think, if somebody else engineered it, but it was just too good to get ruined.
Let's say we had All Things Must Pass and we had Jeff Emmerich engineering.
Oh yeah,
let George produce it. That's fine, but let Jeff Emmerich do it. Recorded. Where was it recorded? Was it recorded in Abbey Road? That doesn't sound like an Abbey Road record.
Let me see. It looks like this may take a while. Hang on.
We're winging it.
That's something that I should just know. And
I just
don't.
It was recorded at Trident and Apple and at Apple.
Okay.
And it says EMI, but it doesn't sound like EMI.
Yeah.
But it could be a Trident. I'll give it that. And I don't know how much of it was recorded where, and
Yeah.
I'm just trying to look.
I have heard people say that Phil Spector ruins All Things Must Pass, and I don't think that's true.
No, I don't think so. I would have loved to have somebody else.
I don't think it could have been ruined, but
it's awfully strong.
It could have been better. Yeah.
I didn't choose anything from it, which is all the albums that I think are really, really great. I didn't choose anything off of them. Go figure. I don't know. All right, cool. Well, we did it. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you. I want to thank Todd Evans and Dave Lubin for coming on tonight and talking our top 10 Beatles solo tracks. It's a fun discussion. We want to hear from you in the chat. What are your favorite top 10 Beatles solo tracks or singles or any cuts off of albums? We want to hear from you. There's no wrong answers. We just want to hear it because I know, I'm sure my list was wrong, but these gentlemen, their lists aren't wrong. But yeah, we want to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed, please do, for crying out loud. I mean, why haven't you? But do that, and we've got more great content on the way. The things coming out all the time. I'm just saying, throwing it out there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. We will see everybody on the next one.